Hello lovelies, it's another comment video, and as well as being cheap and easy content, I think I actually prefer replying to comments this way. Big part of the reason I started doing YouTube seriously was that I was fed up of being taken out of context and misunderstood. Misunderstandings is going to be something of a theme today, I think. I was fed up of that, and I figured by having my face, ironically enough, and my voice in a video, people could hear and see my sincerity, my body language, hear the tone of my voice, all that sort of thing. So I kind of prefer this for replying to comments, though I will continue to reply in text as well, and then kind of maybe recap on here after I've had a few days to percolate ideas. Of course, if you don't see me on camera, it's either because I'm a mess and don't want to appear on camera, or I'm having the brain worms and just don't feel like being on camera for that reason. So yeah, you can gauge my mood by how much I appear on camera, should you so wish. Right, into the comments. There was a bunch more stuff on the Kalergi plan. Again, I had to remove one guy from the channel because he was just being outright offensive and nasty and openly racist and anti-Semitic. Same thing, really. So yeah, I can't reply to his comments here, but they didn't really amount to much anyway, just more ranting. Has inspired me to do a video maybe over the weekend, maybe next week, on the pornography conspiracy that some people believe. So that should be fun. One comment from a Michael Steen says, political talent can awaken and educate, never be learnt. Genetics breaks all. Supposedly this is a quote from Kalergi. I mean, the guy had some peculiar ideas about race and genetics. I don't remember reading that exact quote, but they are probably working from a translation made by a white supremacist, which unfortunately is the main version that you can find out there anywhere, sadly. Yeah, it was the between the war years. Pretty much everybody had these same peculiar ideas at the time. I have an old school book from the 1920s that goes into quite some detail on eugenics and so on. But genetics doesn't have that deep of an effect. It is parameters, not destiny. Right? And it's things like how intelligent you can be, not your culture. And even then, on intelligence, it doesn't have a huge amount of influence. Things like diet have as big or bigger influence, which is something these people never really follow. But yeah, genetics aren't destiny. Yeah, he was doing some more cherry picking, none of which really defeats the point that these were observations on the world and predictions for the future, which is always the point and always what defeats them, because they can't demonstrate the existence of a plan. Tea House commented on the safety tools video. Yeah, we keep doing that. He said, I typed a long post, but I think I can summarize by saying, I understand where you're coming from, but my experience and observation is to the contrary. For the issue of time efficiency, I see the opposite effect as well as a result of safety tools. For the point of immersion, I'm a little unsure how that's in the scope of the discussion. But in regards to that point as well, I think it's less immersion breaking to have a system set up to handle those moments than it is to have a player shut down at the table or to open a long debate at the table that inevitably devolves. Getting up from a table is certainly an option, but as a GM I would rather have feedback. Not every safety tool is appropriate for every situation or every table, just like any other tool, and to disregard them wholesale is, in my opinion, short-sighted. Some other stuff that's irrelevant. Okay, timing. Right. If you're playing with a group that you already know, you do not need to use safety tools because you already know each other. You already have a certain amount of trust for each other, and you already know what upsets each other, and you can even play around with those elements that upset each other for the sake of the game. If someone has a fear of spiders and you knowingly include spiders in an adventure to evoke a proper sense of revulsion and terror, that's storytelling. That's the art of storytelling. Immersion-wise, immersion seems to be unfashionable at the moment because all of these story games take place at a meta level. You're not playing the character, you're playing a writer or a co-writer with particular interest in a character, but you're not immersed in the character because there are too many meta systems where it's not about what your character can do, but what you can do to influence the narrative. So maybe that's why there's a disjunct in people's understanding of immersion as a goal, and it always used to be the goal of role-playing games. That's an interesting thing to poke and prod at, I think. But if you're in the middle of a scene and someone interrupts it, obviously that breaks immersion, right? And things like X cards and so on are a license to constantly interrupt the session and disrupt the session, break the flow, break the sense that everyone has of being in the scene. Whereas someone quietly excusing themselves is less disruptive. Now, you could call basic human communication and interaction a safety tool if you want, but keeping it informal and so on is a lot better. And it's not as abusable as so-called safety tools are. And back to the timing thing, at conventions, you don't have time. You don't have time to go through a massive checklist of everyone's problems that they might have with elements of any game, right? And you don't have the time to modify your adventure easily on the fly, depending on system and so on, obviously, right? Plus, why would you want to hand a list of your triggers and buttons to a total stranger? That doesn't seem very safe to me. So there's a bunch of other reasons that I either didn't reiterate or couldn't be bothered to reiterate. But yeah, there's more problems than just the ones that I covered. Outlaw Stargazer says, I'm an older millennial, but I grew up in the South, presumably the South of America, where the satanic panic is still going strong. These people pushing all this crap into RPGs are the same religious nuts with a different religion. I have mental disabilities and traumas too. I don't need a fucking X card. Yeah, I'm guessing that as an older millennial, you're closer to Gen X attitude, and being surrounded by those sorts of people definitely hardens you to a point. I think there is something cultural missing from the people after Gen X, and I guess the older millennials. It's great that bullying has stopped, but it has changed the culture. It's great that people are so socially aware, but they're misapplying it to fiction and horror and so on, and that's why it pretty much is the same rhetoric but coming from a different it's not really a religion. It just shares a lot with religion. Ideology, not even that really. There's this excuse me, there's this willful attempt to find something, anything objectionable in everything that they consume or pass by. I don't understand the urge. It's institutional strawmanning of everything. The Angry Piper says on my statement on the tabletopless problems, this is obviously upsetting to you, Grim, but is there any way we can get some context on this? I know what tabletopless is, but I've never watched it. Was this someone external to the show that had an issue? Someone on the show having an issue with you personally? Someone having an issue with the material? Or is it people on the show having issues with each other? If you don't want to air anymore here, is there somewhere else we can find the story? Tabletopless did put out a statement of their own. I waited till after that was to put out my statement. Some other guy was commenting on this. I don't understand. What's all this about? To which I explained, this was for people in the know and was personal, and then they flounced off and unsubscribed in a huff. So, I don't know. Other videos are available. I don't necessarily want to go hugely into it, but the crux of the matter is that one player fell out with the producers, and the falling out and the split with the producers has not been terribly helpful, and another player has decided to leave for other unrelated reasons, and it's not clear after all this whether the last player will leave or not. It appears to be nothing I've done, but some of the people who've been involved in the show have been critical of me, which has been difficult because I've always gone out of my way to make sure everyone is comfortable and happy and feels able to speak up or anything. I think the whole problem is basically down primarily to miscommunication and so many people involved in the show being neurodivergent in one way or another, which makes communication difficult and makes miscommunication more common and more easy to fall into. So yeah, we're just horribly disrupted at the moment, and it's something I care about a great deal, and I care about all the people involved a great deal. So it has been intensely stressful, and a lot of the fuss that was blown up about it and around it has basically brought up every memory of my various cancellations and the cancellations of friends of mine in the past. So it's been very difficult. Troffle says, coming in so very obviously late. Seen your reviews and commentary for ages. Housemate and I are partway through your D6 Star Wars, which is the first of your game runs we've ever seen, but it's great. It's a small sample, but honestly I'm wondering what anybody, especially with experience in the adult industry, could possibly find unsettling about your games, unless it went into a weird horror module or something. Somebody had a very specific trigger issue, or just misunderstandings all round. Yeah, it's not me for once, really. Though, like I say, there's been some criticism. It's just friends falling out with friends, and I've got other friends falling out with other friends at the same time, and a third group at the same time. So it's just a lot of stress for me, because people often want you to pick sides or whatever, and I'm not down for that here. Back to the Kalergi plan. Jackie Roberts, who has a Welsh flag, which is kind of weird because that makes them a racial minority, says just over 300 likes. That says it all, really, about the video. So yeah, go look up Argumentum ad Populum. Back to Tabletopless. Paul Cooper says, so these players get naked, masturbate and have sex on screen, and they get creeped out by you. What the fuck? Well, I talked things out with the person who was creeped out by me, though there have been other comments elsewhere, and they seem okay, good with me now. I think with some people, there just seems to be a kind of distrust and dislike of cisgender male people. unfortunately. Yeah. Lepidoptera says, pornography always has fights. Her jubbly sag too much. He's too flaccid. Nobody needs this shit in TRPGs. Someone taking out the bum for money, being offended by TRPG content is more to laugh at than the woke scolds on Twitter. You sleep in the barn, expect to wake up with fleas. Being sexually open and curious does not mean that you're not upset or whatever by other things, right? And I don't like your judgmental, nasty tone here. There can be some jealousy, but overall, my experience with people who work or have worked in the porn industry is that they are very real, very low bullshit people, and that's a big part of what I appreciate about them. I like people like that. So I guess part of the hurt in this is seeing that image get shattered a little bit, I suppose. Oh, here's the guy. Nightwind67 says, I'm finding out more and more that the creators of YouTube videos lack a lot of context. What is Tabletopless? Please don't think that everyone watching your videos knows what you're talking about. Right, I think he meant context. So there's that. And I explained earlier why that video in particular doesn't necessarily have a lot of context. It's inside baseball. It's personal. It's not reportage. And then, yeah, he said, oh, so there's no reason to have watched it. I'll unsubscribe. Just because there's one video doesn't mean the rest are of the same type. What is Tabletopless? Tabletopless is a streamed tabletop RPG show with combining adult entertainment and genuine, authentic role-playing game experience. You know, in worlds with the sexiness dialed up quite a lot. So that's what it is. It's me running a game for a bunch of porn people who also perform in an adult fashion for the people who are watching, and where the tips can trigger the adult action or influence the game. That's what it is. But obviously, like any tabletop role-playing group, it depends on the relationships and friendships between the people involved playing the game, and as such, you have all the normal interpersonal risks of people falling out with each other. Okay? Okay. Lepidoptera again on another one of the Tabletopless comment threads. Lepidoptera says, nobody will even watch the Cypher game stream Grim ran on T-Shirted Historian's channel that had a half-naked girl on it, open lab coat and intimates, and I promoted it in every chat I was in since it aired last week. 100 views for that live play game video, less than normal videos on the channel. That may be because it was restreamed there. I'm not sure how many views it got on my other channel, Grim Streams. Go and subscribe. Let's have a quick look, shall we? But bear in mind, I only have about 400 subs over there, so like I say, go and subscribe. Let's see. Yeah, The Strange only got something like 50 views on my channel, but when you add that together with the views on T-Shirt's channel, so well, that's about 150. It's not bad for a tabletop live stream, to be honest. That's not full of voice actor talent. But you know, that project is about me playing every game in my shelves that I haven't played before, and getting together with friends, and anything else is just a bonus. You know, it would be nice to get a bit of money for it, but yeah. Just to pass by, it says, you've been TTRPGing for over 40 years. Did you start at 12 or before that? Before that. 7 or 8 when I really started playing. So, well, that's 82, 83 with Choose Your Own Adventure books. I have a tendency to misremember, but I do know I started very young. The Warlock of Firetop Mountain came out in 1982, so I would have been 7 or 8, and that is about when I started role-playing, if you count game books, which I do because of the way in which we played them. And that was my entry route into TTRPGs, so... Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, so I still haven't gotten to play Baldur's Gate 3 yet. Like I said, I'm waiting on the console version. But my video on the fuss and the response to it was quite interesting in terms of the comments we got. K-Mike says, honestly, this is closer to how 5e was at the beginning, before the rules bloat and infantilization of their settings. The action is fairly graphic, and the humour, while a tad cringe at times, feels like the jokes players actually make. I've honestly been second-guessing my 5e bad dogma. I wonder about the people who made the game, whether they were coming at it influenced more by the earlier Baldur's Gate games rather than playing the tabletop game, and whether they had much or any 5e tabletop experience going into making the game, because it just goes to show how the way in which you play a game can be socially influenced, and if you play it rules as written, you can get a very different feel to a game if you defy the expectations and play exactly to the rules, you know. And that's kind of what computer games do. They push the rules into the background and run them as written without fudging, which is what some people were complaining about, even though there is a sort of fudged dice mode in the game. But yeah. Dog of Hades on that video also says, late to the party with just a voiceover. Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't always feel like being on screen. Okay? I might be sweaty, I might be unwell, I might be feeling like a disgusting fat body that day. There's lots of reasons why I might not appear on screen. Wickaden says, Larry in Baldur's Gate 3 gives players what they want, escapism into a fantasy world, not the twisted version of D&D made by activists that want to indoctrinate. So, also on that same video, because in part I was talking about game journalists fucking up their opportunity here, someone tried to get into it with me about Gamergate. So a couple of addendums. Gamergate's real roots came more from 4chan's Anon culture than the so-called left libertarian side of things when it kicked off, and it was primarily Anons, especially /Poll, that kept making all of the major breakthroughs early on. And you, sir, are not and never have been an old-school Anon, and never were, nor were you as important as Jim, aka Internet Aristocrat. Here he goes on more. I was there right from the beginning. I was in the early IRC channels. talking about it, doing the research, when it was just the conspiracy. I have lurked on 4chan quite a lot in the past, so you're confidently making these assertions about me which are just not true. And I would say that 4chan, for all of its ironic Nazism and so on to keep normies out of the site, very much fits into the left libertarian mould. And if you look at what happened, and if you look at the many surveys into people's political positions and so on, you'll see that Gamergate as a whole clustered on the left libertarian side. So yeah, I don't know really what you're arguing, other than you don't know anything. I was specifically attacked and criticised by aggros because I was in those early IRC channels. So I don't know what you're trying to prove or assert. I don't think I'm an e-celeb at all, let alone even a minor one. I'm just a guy who's interested in these topics. So I really don't know what your fucking issue is. Go stick your head in a pig. Fjordkeeper says on the Wizards video, to be quite honest, I don't really agree that you can simply put all of the blame on evil corporate suits. Sure, they're responsible for a lot of what's going wrong in the industry. However, I'm of the belief that there are simply a lot of shitty devs that are utter dog shit at their job, just like in any other industry. And they know it, which is why they get so defensive on social media when you compare their shitty game design, story, UI with an actual good game. Not a fan of corporate suits that only exist to please investors, but they're way too often used as a scapegoat for people that suck at their job. To an extent that's true, right? But so many people work on these games that most of them are going to be mediocre in the first place, right? 90% of anything is crap, to quote Sturgeon's law. But what's important is that you have the visionary people at the top, and you create an environment in which people can flower and do their best work. And constant chopping and changing, rushing, forced crunch, all of these issues, trend chasing, all of it tends to result in bad unfinished games going to press. Anthem, that more recent Vampire Gamers Service thing that came out, there's so many examples that we can point to. So it's worth, we can't just complain. We have to big up and celebrate when someone does something right. Right. That's retreading old ground. Broken Serenity says, I suspect Wizards of the Coast are currently scrabbling to throw together a crappy BG3 tie-in book for the game that'll likely slide out onto shelves early next year, months after it should have been released. So, typical Wizards of the Coast these days, really. I mean, there is Descent into Avernus, which someone pointed out in the comments, but they have put out some kind of web-only little doodad about Baldur's Gate, which I haven't bothered to look at. So, yeah. Okay, back to the Kalergi plan. Obsgugashfutchk, which sounds like one of the demons from the Young Ones. Futumsh. Oh. Quote, white families do not represent London, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan is the current mayor of London, for those of you who don't know. This is a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with the video whatsoever. And what was meant by that quote was that London is now a very mixed, multicultural, melting pot city. And so the idea that, I don't know, Alf Garnett represents what London is these days just isn't true. What probably would represent London, I don't know, mixed race family living in the East End, perhaps. But yeah, London is a truly international city, like New York is, for example. Lots of comments about bears. This is a common complaint on the Kalogi Plan video, so I'm saying that it's not happening, but it would be a good thing that it is, which isn't exactly what I'm saying. And this is often repeated. There is no plan. There is no conspiracy. But immigration is a good thing. Immigration isn't the fulfillment of some sinister plot to eliminate white people or whatever. It is something that Kalogi predicted, more movement around the world between different peoples, more intermarriages and so on. And he was right, and it's not a bad thing. So I don't know what these people think they're saying or why they think it's an own, other than that they're very, very stupid. Simozoros said, what is your opinion on safety tools in LARP? Do you see an overlap between safety tools in LARP and tabletop, or do you believe them to be unrelated? Do you see a better alternative? Salon-style LARPs is where I have the majority of my experience, so I will speak to that. Because you are inhabiting your character for the duration of the game, typically, except when rules interfere, in LARP, they are much more immersive. And so I think you do need to be a little more mindful of people's comfort and so on in LARPs. The way we used to do it in the Camarilla was that at any point in a difficult scene, you could call for a fade to black. Right, this was a largely informal rule. It hardly ever came up. But it was there, and that's not particularly disruptive. It still allows the thing that was being talked about to happen. So, your character could be tortured or raped or whatever could still happen to them, but you didn't have to play through it, right? And that was enough. God knows how the remnants of the Camarilla do it these days, or the other more independent LARP organisations do it these days, but I dare say they wouldn't think Fade to Black was enough, because there seems to be this desire to retcon anything nasty that happened, not just, turn the camera away, so to speak. Emask says on my review of the Black Sword hack, nice review, but I'd like to comment on a couple of points. Solo play is, or can be, there's no one way of doing it, different from both group playing and novel writing. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, it's much closer to the former. I'm no writer, I hate writing, I love playing with my friends, preferably in person. I also like playing solo, it scratches a different itch. I've no desire to play online with strangers, to be honest. I don't think my preferences are symptoms of any malaise. It's okay if you don't understand the appeal of solo play, but why such harsh comments about it then? As for the Oracle, yes, you could use Tarot, you could use I Ching, you could use Tassiomancy, or you could use the tables in the book. Where is the problem in providing a tool? The tables in the books tend to be rather limited in scope. It would be a good, if difficult, project for someone if they made a whole book that was an Oracle. We're talking the kind of detail and length that the old central casting character books used to have. That sort of thing. Not something I want to undertake, at least at the moment. I think I do understand the appeal of solo play, but it doesn't appeal to me. my reaction is harsh because I have seen tabletop role-playing try to chase the same niche as other kinds of gaming before in the past, and to have failed horribly. 4th edition D&D was trying to chase the MMO market, but what role-playing does well are things that nothing else does, and at least for the foreseeable, even with the advances in AI, probably never will do, at least for the foreseeable future. And for solo play, pre-generated game books are better, Fighting Fantasy, Blood Sword, those sorts of things. Those do it better. So solo play RPGs, they fall between two stools. They don't really fit anywhere. If you have fun with them, that's fine. But when I'm reviewing something, I'm giving my opinion, my attitudes, and that's what you're here for. You're welcome to disagree. And yeah, if I don't like something, it doesn't mean you can't like it. That's fine. So. Leet Pirates on the Safety Tools video says, this take is honestly pretty childish. This coming from someone called Leet Pirates. Your style is dated and unlikely to be popular again because people largely disagree with you. If Safety Tools make more folks feel welcomed into the game table, then I can't think of a reason not to use them that doesn't boil down to self-centered nonsense. I've been a DM for a little more than 20 years, so this isn't coming from some noob either. Frankly, I think it's pretty pathetic that you feel you can't create a good story while respecting your players. Every player sits down at the table with an entire life of experiences that have affected them and informs what they will perceive as fun. Just because you don't have the same experience which shaped the individual, it doesn't make them any less valid. As a DM, you have the power to make the game world anything you want it to be, so nothing you don't enjoy will ever happen there. Give your players the same freedom to enjoy themselves. I have run scenes that I haven't enjoyed because players enjoy them. So, largely, fuck off. Do people largely disagree with me, or is it a fraction of vocal bullies on Twitter that don't agree with me? I don't think these rules are respectful. As someone with trauma and disability, I don't find them respectful. I find them coddling. I find them to be the soft bigotry of low expectations. I don't want to be coddled. I don't want to be treated as fragile. I don't want to be patronized. And for me, it's disrespectful to me as a player, to the other players, to the games master who has put the adventure together, to constantly interrupt because of my personal problems, or for any player to interrupt because of their personal problems. And if we're talking subjective personal experiences, then my subjective personal experience is as valid as anybody else's. So if you're saying in your subjective personal experience, these are a good thing, fine for you, use them and ruin your game if you want to. I don't want to. And if it's all down to subjective personal experience, then we're at a stalemate, because both have to be held valid. So how about you fuck off and play at a different table, and I'll play my game how I like, right? This person then had the audacity to say, very cute. If you ever want to engage honestly, let me know. All this says is you don't actually have a good argument. I mean, the arguments are in the video, right? How are you supposed to have any kind of useful, meaningful conversation with these people? In the Safety Tools video, I did bring up the UK Games Expo issue, which I described as an assumed phantasmagorical butt rape that never happened, which apparently was quite funny. But Bearnaff did point out something that I didn't mention, which I probably should have, despite this not being the focus of the video. He says, "You missed the important part. The original misinterpretation was fairly small and would have been easily remedied. The problem arose, I think you mean, with a big scare quotes journalist needing to make a piece for the BBC, ran across the grumpy tweet and decided to make it the focus of one of their articles on the Expo." Yeah, but that still doesn't excuse how the Expo acted in assuming bad conduct, not really letting the guy defend himself, and perma-banning him over people coming up with something that upset them after the game without using any of the safety tools, which I think are mandatory at UK Games Expo. You know, it was just a hugely unfair thing and an example of just why safety tools don't work and the kind of atmosphere that they create. You know, what could have been a bad GM horror story that everyone could laugh at on Reddit became a huge news story, well, at least in our circles, and ended up with someone getting banned from conventions. Not just that one convention. Yeah, that doesn't seem fair or right or proportionate to me. Captain Pazuzu says, "Here's a safety rule. Don't play with people who want safety tools. Play with adults instead." I agree. That's why I came up with the M card. He also says, "I think you nailed it when you said that people, adults if you will, can draw a line between fantasy and reality. You often mention your psychological struggles, but frankly you seem to me to be the only sane person in the room more often than not. Stay cool, sir." I think being aware of your issues lets you slip into a more analytical mindset, which is a way of coping with those issues. A lot of cognitive behavior therapy, which I don't think that much of, is about slipping into an analytical mindset and examining what is going on with Vulcan logic, rather than allowing your emotions to take over without invalidating those emotions. So, you know, I feel horrible, I think everyone hates me, blah blah blah, but then you slip into the analytical mindset and say, okay, what have people actually done? Who are these people? Do I know them? What about the people I know? How do they, act and react around me? That sort of thing. And you can come out of that feeling better. CBT doesn't work particularly well for me, but that kind of analytical mode, that kind of rationalization, intellectualization of problems does. It's the only good thing I got out of CBT. So, Cranky Smurf said a couple of good things about how they used to follow Ginny D until she wrote a tweet that mocked grognards, and how we older players are not the target audience anymore, but we have more disposable income. And he unfollowed her over that. He also said, "I find the entire concept of safety tools to be a way for players to hijack a game. Don't like to face zombies? Well, raise that X card and kill the entire session that uses undead." Yeah, that is the problem. That is what the people who back them don't seem to understand, or willfully don't seem to understand quite how disruptive and disrespectful these kind of tools are, the damage they can do to a game. I find that really peculiar. I think they don't understand because they don't want to understand. And I really do think it's largely hollow virtue signaling, because we've got all these examples, not just the high profile ones, of how they don't work. They don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't avoid problems, they make problems, and they change the culture around games in a way that breaks immersion and stops them from being art anymore. Regina McQueen says, "While I don't agree with everything Ginny D says, I'll be an advocate on her behalf in this case. Safety tools are meant to ensure that everyone is on the same page for the experience you're looking for. It's not meant to limit you. It's more a matchmaking system for GMs and players. You have intellect with no empathy for others' struggles. Good job continuing the toxic male stereotype. I know this will be buried under your that guy sycophants, but I still feel I had to say my piece. I did talk about empathy and the lack of empathy that safety tools show towards the games master and the other players. Safety tools aren't about ensuring everyone is on the same page for the experience you're looking for. They're about interrupting and disrupting play because you're triggered or whatever. The matchmaking system is having a regular group, or at conventions is the sign-up sheet. We're playing this game. It is aimed at this kind of age bracket and this kind of content. So we are playing Lamentations of the Flame Princess. We are playing a body horror module, 18 plus, horror fans only, right? That is the matchmaking. The safety tools don't do that. Regina then went on to say, Lamau, you can't just say it's more empathetic and just expect that to be truth. You're missing the show, not tell, in both storytelling and practical senses. That seems completely non sequitur to me. Your argument is flawed. I'm not saying those who force safety tools have any better an argument. What I'm saying is the addition of these tools, while clunky and inelegant for the time being, are there to keep people safe. You are never unsafe at the tabletop. While it's nice to know about your mental health struggles, you cannot lump yourself in with everyone else with mental health issues. Why not? They do. I'll make some assumptions. You've never been sexually assaulted. Wrong. You've never been held at gunpoint. I've never been held at gunpoint. I've been held at knife point. You don't know the depths of trauma that other people face. I do. For you to sit there on your lofty throne and make these sweeping judgments tells me that your empathy is broken, or at least very corrupted. I'm so annoyed I came back for the most useless line in the debate. Yeah, you don't know me. You can't make those assumptions. And many of those horrible things have happened to people I know and care about, but none of that changes the argument. In fact, most of those people who've been through trauma and so on would violently disagree with you. I used to know a girl who was sexually assaulted, and she dealt with that issue through CNC and BDSM because that gave her that sense of control. You know, so you can't blanket assume for everybody else, and you certainly can't then turn around and accuse someone else of it. Say there's a typical gaming group, 6 people around the table. One person has an issue with the module that's running. Everyone else is having a good time. The games master put a lot of effort in, and you're going to disrupt that game for all those other people. Where's your empathy for their enjoyment? Where's your empathy for the games master's effort that they've gone to? Why can't you deal with your own problems? Step away from the table if you need to. I'm sure people will be forgiving and understanding. Then come back later. Right? You're mistaking empathy for narcissism, unfortunately. So Ensign Redcoat said something interesting. He said, I entered into a debate about the need for, or lack of, safety tools on the Vampire the Masquerade Facebook group a few months ago, and I wish I hadn't bothered. The kickback I received was astounding. I've run World of Darkness games since the 90s, and it's deeply saddening to see what I can only describe as an infantilization of the hobby, basically in a genre that's meant to be for mature players. It's also particularly depressing to see supposed progressives using all the talking points of Bible-bashing conservatism just with a new, inclusive-looking veneer. Yeah, talking to my therapist yesterday, and the common thread of the things that have massively upset me is the feeling of betrayal. You know, you stand side by side with people for decades fighting against censorship and control and absurd hyperbole about the dangers of games or whatever, only to find them turn on you when it's the same old bullshit with a new veneer. Back on the video that was about the death of feminist frequency, Just Stroll MF says, I think Matt Walsh's opinions on art are atrocious, if not puritanical, but the right is rising because the left lost its mind. When you start saying things like men can get pregnant or have periods, guys like Matt Walsh look more reasonable than they are. As for Trump, I have no doubt he has some hidden level of corruption, but in reality the left make some more sympathetic when they indict him with weak cases that go nowhere or have little evidence to indict him. They thus make him into a martyr and make him a stronger candidate. Leftist witch hunts and gender stupidity are basically a red carpet for Trump or someone worse than Trump to take over, and they actually deserve it. They ignored the real working class problems for college theories about nonsense. And this goes back further than you think, really. The sort of racial identity politics and stuff came in America with the new left movement. That's when that came about. But I don't consider, I know I'm the lone voice here, but I don't consider these ideas to be left-wing. A gender or a racial hierarchy, inverted or otherwise, is still a hierarchy, and left-wing philosophy is supposed to be against hierarchies. You know, you should no more elevate a transgender lesbian wheelchair user than you should denigrate them, right? But unfortunately, we've just inverted hierarchies. But again, I don't think this is left wing, precisely because they're ignoring the working class. The thing that transcends all of these issues is class and wealth. If you enter into redistribution, you help all of those groups that are disenfranchised or otherwise rendered poor and so on by prejudice, and that is actually one of the better ways to tackle prejudice, is to shift and change perceptions and ideas by altering people's experience with each other and people's material experience. But yeah, unfortunately, the left seems, well, inverted commas left, seems to have abandoned class politics, material politics, for identity politics, but then the right has followed suit. As to Trump, I don't think the cases are weak. I think he's fucked because he's actually on record. He got his voice, saying, I'm Mr. Crimes, I do the crimes. Here's a crime I did. To ignore that is just willfully bizarre. On the safety tools, Lysander said, it's interesting to see the plug for the Neverwhere game, considering that these days Neil Gaiman would probably pressure his agent to reject any such advance for semi-official rights based on the hearsay surrounding you. I am not so sure. Occasionally you still get flashes of the old Neil Gaiman, and he did write a rather interesting op-ed quite some years ago called In Defense of Icky Speech, or something like that, where he was defending someone's right to buy and transport lolly manga. So Gaiman at least was, probably still is, based, but like me, I think he's kind of caught up in and confused by the way in which the quote-unquote left has changed around him. Yes. So I mentioned the way that the right is also banning books and things at the moment, and a couple of people took up with me, trying to claim that these books really did have pornography in them, like illustrations of a boy sucking another boy's cock, and that these should be kept out of the hands of even gay kids, and so on. Look, if you actually look into this stuff, what you find is that these are educational books, that the drawings are not pornographic, they are illustrative. If you consider these pornographic, then you should consider the cutaway diagrams of penis and ovaries in a biology textbook to be pornography, and obviously that's dumb as fuck. It's all a fuss about nothing. If that stuff is pornography in your eyes, you live a horribly, horribly sheltered life. It's better. Sex education is always better when it starts earlier. It doesn't twist or warp anyone. All you need to do is to look at the way in which the Netherlands teaches sex ed to kids, including LGBT stuff, and look at the way America teaches it, and then compare the STD rates and teen pregnancies and so on, and it becomes rapidly obvious which is the better, more humane, more ethical approach. Let's see. Joe Ulas6 says, "Lol, you talk shit about Ginny while you hide behind an avatar, coward." I mean, if you want to see me, there's plenty of videos on the channel where you can. I just haven't been feeling particularly photogenic lately. And arguing against Ginny's thesis isn't necessarily an attack against Ginny, and it wouldn't necessarily matter if it were. You're wrong because you're ugly is an ad hominem attack. You're wrong because XYZ and you're ugly is an insult attached to an argument and not an ad hominem. Learn the difference. Beamer says, "In short, youngsters cannot propose safety tools because they are triggering to those of us who lived through the satanic panic and its ilk, and they make us feel unsafe. It's on the young people not to offend us once we tell them it's offensive. It's not on us to change what bothers us. That's victim blaming." Yeah, odd how they won't accept that line of argument, isn't it? We're at 5 days ago now. No, not Blackleaf. Yeah. OGGM says about safety tools, "They don't work. I've seen them used, and I've used them, and they don't work. But maybe they work for her. I don't know. Her rant did not make her any better than the people who talk shit about her, so it's hard to respect her. But I get that it's expected of the Ginny D character to say things like she does. For 35 years we were adults who remember the lessons from preschool to play nice together. Then the industry changed. If people like Ginny D would just fuck off and let us play our games the way we want, there would be no problem. It is the imposition of these rules, the expectation of these rules, and their caustic effect on gaming culture that is the problem." Nerdy Ogre says, 18 plus gaming content, fade to black, character death is possible. This is all you need to post at your table. If even that. People are still trying to persuade me to like Powered by the Apocalypse games. But look, alright, if you enjoy them, fine. They don't do what I want. I don't enjoy them. It's just, it's taste. I have tried. I have heroically tried to get on with PBTA games. I can't. Okay, so this came up on the last week's Week in Geek, and then Greenfang has found an old video of mine about Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and asking what men really need. Greenfang says, I think men's rights should really be a left-wing movement. It's not just the right trying to get attention on the issue, pushing it to the right, but leftists want to equate anything straight male with right-wing patriarchy, which shows we don't really have left-wing movements, only competitors for the crony crown that is the right wing. Still, I think it ultimately holds. I often see supposed liberal women scoffing at anything male, with the exception of homosexuality, as not living up to the full alleged straight male Mike Rowe's dirty dubes fantasy, even disrespecting men who try to align with leftism, as if they are unmasculine for not taking this right-wing position on power and actively fighting the liberals. That's a lot of politics that I don't necessarily agree with, but the start of it there, yeah, men's rights should be a left-wing movement because it's a struggle for equality and fairness, which are touchstones of the left. I think you just seem to run into an impassable wall of problems trying to address men's issues from any perspective. 'Tis lame. Liberal Hyena said on comments last week, which I normally don't reference, but I'd mentioned a couple of times that there was no Harry Potter RPG or tabletop game, meaning RPG, but he wanted to point out that there was a miniatures game. So I will placate Liberal Hyena by saying, okay, there is a Harry Potter miniatures game that you can play, but it's not a role-playing game. Still, that might mean that Rowling is amenable to someone coming forward and pursuing the license. I probably don't have enough money, but it's been the dream license for a very long time for tabletop games. Ignoring the comments videos. So my older video on Descent into Avernus got a few extra hits, probably because of the Baldur's Gate stuff. Sunsin says, personally I could not care less about Baldur's Gate, never played the video games, loathe the Forgotten Realms as a setting. I'm just interested in information on Avernus for a Hell campaign I'm working on, but this sounds useless for that as well. The problem with modern Wizards books, I think, is that they are expensive but shallow. They just don't have a lot of useful information in them. And that's that. Alright, so I'll be on the Week in Geek tomorrow night. Hopefully playing Darwin's World with T-shirt on Sunday, and then almost immediately after I am supposed to be on Inappropriate Characters. So I will see you there. Pulp Nova is a collection of short stories in the old pulp style but with a modern twist. You should find something here you like, from western to mythos horror to science fiction. You can get Pulp Nova at Drive-Thru Fiction, on Amazon, or in hard copy from lulu.com.
Monster misbehaving, planets needing saving, situations graven, I'll form the head. The enemy is clever, we're smaller but whatever. When we put it together, I'll form the head. Y'all can do the treading, swing energy machete. If combination's ready, I'll form the head. I'll form the head.